In late January 2019, deep in the South Pacific Ocean, a team of researchers made a discovery that sent chills down the spines of military historians around the world. At a crushing depth of 17,500 feet, they found the USS Hornet, a legendary World War II aircraft carrier that had been missing for 77 years. But this wasn't just any shipwreck discovery. The Hornet was sitting completely upright on the ocean floor, remarkably preserved like a massive underwater museum. And when they sent down the cameras to explore what was inside, they found something incredible. Every single weapon on that ship was still in position from October 26, 1942, the day she was sunk during the Battle of Santa Cruz Islands. We're talking about guns, cannons, aircraft, and artillery that have been sitting on the ocean floor for over 7 decades. The pressure down there is so intense that it would crush a human body instantly, but somehow it's created preservation conditions that have turned this warship into an incredible military time capsule. Research vessel Petrel, funded by Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen, had been searching for the Hornet for months, using advanced sonar technology and historical records from 9 different U.S. warships that witnessed the sinking. When they finally located the wreck using autonomous underwater vehicles, even the most experienced deep-sea explorers were amazed by what they found. The ship's condition far exceeded their expectations for a vessel that had been underwater for 77 years. Today, we're going to explore every weapon they found inside this sunken giant. And trust me, some of these discoveries will blow your mind. From massive naval guns that could sink destroyers to fighter plane machine guns preserved in the deep, this is the story of weapons frozen in their final battle. The 5-inch guns on the USS Hornet. But these weren't just regular ship guns. They had a dual-purpose design that made Japanese pilots absolutely terrified. And what the dive team found about their condition will give you chills. The Hornet carried 8 of these massive dual-purpose guns as her main battery. And when I say massive, I mean each gun weighed several tons and stood as tall as a 2-story building. These weren't some small defensive weapons. Each barrel was over 19 feet long and could punch through several inches of steel armor. The guns were mounted as 8 single mounts positioned amidships, with 4 guns on each side of the ship, giving excellent coverage for both anti-aircraft and surface engagements. The dual-purpose designation meant they could fire armor-piercing shells at enemy ships on the horizon, or switch to anti-aircraft shells to blast planes out of the sky with equal effectiveness. The gun crews could swap between different types of ammunition, depending on the threat, making these weapons incredibly versatile. During the Battle of Santa Cruz Islands in October 1942, these guns were literally the Hornet's main line of heavy defense against waves of Japanese dive bombers and torpedo planes that came at them in coordinated attacks throughout the day. Each 5-inch gun fired 55-pound shells at targets up to 18,000 yards away. And to put that in perspective, that's over 10 miles of range, farther than you can see on a clear day. The experienced gun crews could pump out 15 to 20 rounds per minute when under attack, turning each mount into a rapid-fire artillery piece that could devastate incoming aircraft formations. The shells exploded with enough force to destroy a small building, and when they detonated near aircraft formations, the shrapnel could damage multiple planes with a single shot. According to official naval records from the battle, these guns successfully engaged multiple Japanese aircraft during the Santa Cruz engagement, with gun crews reporting hits on enemy planes diving toward the ship. The ROV footage from the 2019 Petrel expedition shows several of the gun mounts are still visible and intact on the ocean floor after 77 years of sitting and crushing deep ocean pressure. The preservation of these massive weapons systems is remarkable when you consider the extreme conditions they have endured. The cold, oxygen-poor water at such depths has slowed corrosion significantly compared to what you'd expect in shallower waters. You can still see individual components of the gun mounts, including mechanical parts and structural elements that remain recognizable after all these decades underwater. The discovery of these weapons in such condition provides an incredible window into the firepower that American aircraft carriers brought to the Pacific theater. But those big guns weren't the only weapons still visible on the wreck, the 1.1-inch anti-aircraft guns. But the nickname Chicago Piano came from something more interesting than you'd think. and what the ROV cameras captured of these guns is fascinating. The Hornet was armed with 20 of these rapid-fire guns, arranged in 5 quad-mounted clusters spread across the ship's superstructure. Each mount had 4 barrels that could swivel together to track incoming aircraft, creating coordinated defensive fire that could fill sections of sky with explosive shells. The guns were positioned strategically around the ship, on the flight deck, near the island's superstructure, and on specially built gun galleries that gave them clear fields of fire in multiple directions. They called them Chicago pianos, primarily because of their appearance and the fact that they were manufactured in Chicago. The 4-barrel arrangement resembled piano keys, and when viewed from certain angles, the gun mounts looked somewhat like upright pianos. The nickname stuck and became widely used throughout the fleet. The Navy had added defensive positions like these after Pearl Harbor to give better anti-aircraft coverage against the increasingly sophisticated Japanese air attacks that were becoming common in the Pacific theater. These guns were specifically designed to engage Japanese dive bombers and torpedo planes before they could get close enough to release their weapons, and they were positioned to create overlapping fields of fire that would maximize defensive coverage. The gun crews called them effective weapons because of their ability to put multiple rounds into the air simultaneously when enemy aircraft appeared. Each gun mount required a crew of several sailors, gunners, loaders, and spotters who would call out targets and coordinate fire. Each gun fired 120 rounds per minute, and when you multiply that by 4 barrels per mount, you're talking about 480 rounds per minute from each position. When all 5 mounts opened fire simultaneously, the Hornet could put nearly 2,400 rounds per minute into the sky, creating substantial defensive fire. The 0.916-pound shells would detonate in mid-air using timed fuses, sending shrapnel in multiple directions to damage incoming aircraft. During the Santa Cruz battle, survivor accounts described these guns as creating intense defensive fire that lit up the sky with tracer rounds and explosions, turning the engagement into a dramatic display of naval combat. The rapid-fire nature of the weapons meant that once they opened up on incoming targets, they could maintain continuous fire for extended periods. The sound of all the guns firing was distinctive and could be heard over the other noise of battle, giving the weapons their memorable reputation among the crew. The 2019 expedition found several of the quad mounts still visible on the wreck, with the gun positions showing the effects of 77 years underwater but remaining recognizable. The mechanical components that controlled gun movement are preserved in the deep water environment, giving researchers a clear view of how these defensive systems were arranged and operated. Even more interesting, you can still see some of the structural elements that supported the gun mounts, showing how they were integrated into the ship's overall defensive plan. Survivor Richard Nowatzki, who operated one of these gun mounts during the battle, later spoke about his experiences during the engagement. Seeing footage of the wreck brought back memories of that intense day when the crew fought desperately against overwhelming Japanese forces. The spent shell casings and gun positions visible on the wreck tell the story of the crew's determined defensive efforts during their final battle. Make sure you're subscribed because what they found next is even more incredible: the 24mm Oerlikon cannons. But what they found about these Swiss-designed weapons on the wreck floor was completely unexpected, and the reason they're not easily visible might surprise you. By July 1942, the Hornet had 32 of these rapid-fire cannons mounted all over the ship in carefully planned positions. These weren't just randomly placed. Naval architects had strategically positioned each cannon to create defensive coverage that would protect critical areas of the ship's airspace. They were Swiss-designed Oerlikon guns that the U.S. Navy adopted after Pearl Harbor proved they needed better close-range anti-aircraft protection than what they currently had. The Pearl Harbor attack had shown American naval commanders that existing defensive weapons needed improvement, and the .50 caliber machine guns that had been standard were insufficient against modern aircraft threats. These cannons replaced many of the older machine guns and provided significantly improved firepower against low-flying aircraft. The Oerlikon design was reliable and effective, making it an excellent choice for shipboard installation. Each cannon was operated by a single sailor who had to manually track and fire at incoming threats, making it one of the more demanding positions during combat operations. The gunner had to aim using a ring sight while the ship was moving and maneuvering, requiring considerable skill and training. The positions were often exposed, meaning the operators had to perform their duties while under direct threat from enemy aircraft fire. Each 20mm cannon could fire 450 rounds per minute at targets up to 4,800 yards away, creating rapid defensive fire that could damage or destroy approaching aircraft. The 0.2 pound explosive shells were designed to penetrate aircraft skin and detonate inside the target, causing internal damage to critical systems. The shells used high explosive filling that would damage aircraft components even if the initial hit wasn't immediately fatal to the aircraft. Naval armament records confirm all 32 mounts were installed and operational before the Santa Cruz battle, with each position supplied with substantial ammunition stores. The guns were fed by spring-loaded magazines that held 60 rounds each, and trained gunners could replace empty magazines quickly during combat operations. However, when you examine the current ROV footage of the Hornet wreck, most of these weapons are not clearly visible on the ocean floor, which initially surprised the research teams. The reason most Oerlikon cannons aren't easily identified is likely because they were mounted on parts of the ship that suffered damage during the sinking process or have become obscured by sediment over the decades. Many were positioned on lighter structures and external platforms that may have been affected as the massive carrier descended through 17,500 feet of water. The extreme conditions involved in a vessel of that size sinking to such depths would have subjected all external equipment to enormous stresses. Based on the spacing of mount points and gun platforms visible in the detailed footage, naval experts believe the weapons are still present at the wreck site, just not clearly visible in current documentation. Future expeditions with more advanced underwater technology might provide better views of these defensive positions as deep-sea exploration capabilities continue to develop. But the most incredible weapons discovery was something no one expected to find in such condition: the Grumman F-4F Wildcat fighter plane. But what they discovered about this specific Wildcat sitting on the ocean floor will give you chills, and the condition of this aircraft is almost impossible to believe. The Hornet could carry up to 90 aircraft in her hangars and on her flight deck, including F-4F Wildcats that were the Navy's primary fighter planes during the early Pacific War. These weren't just any fighter planes, they were the backbone of American naval aviation in 1942, and the pilots who flew them were among the most skilled aviators in the Pacific Fleet. Each Wildcat was armed with 650 caliber M2 Browning machine guns, 3 mounted in each wing, giving the pilot substantial firepower against enemy aircraft. The 50 caliber Browning was considered one of the finest aircraft weapons of the era, with a reputation for reliability and effectiveness that made it the standard for American fighter aircraft. The guns carried approximately 240 rounds each and could fire at 750 rounds per minute, meaning a pilot could deliver concentrated firepower against enemy targets. The ammunition typically included a mix of armor-piercing, incendiary, and tracer rounds that could penetrate Japanese aircraft armor and cause significant damage. These planes could also carry external ordnance, including bombs for ground attack missions, with standard loads often consisting of 100-pound bombs that could be used against enemy positions or ships. The F-4F Wildcats from the Hornet had proven their capabilities earlier in the war, including during the Battle of Midway, where Hornet air groups participated in the decisive engagement that changed the course of the Pacific War. The ROV cameras found one remarkably intact F-4F Wildcat sitting on the ocean floor with its wings folded in the standard carrier storage position, exactly as it would have been positioned in the ship's hangar during normal operations. The aircraft's preservation is extraordinary when you consider it has been underwater for 77 years. You can clearly see the cockpit area, landing gear components, and the 3-bladed propeller with individual blades clearly defined. According to the expedition reports, the aircraft appears to have settled on the seafloor without suffering the catastrophic damage you might expect from such a sinking. This suggests that the plane was secured in the hangar when the ship went down and somehow came to rest on the bottom in relatively good condition. The cold, oxygen-poor water at 17,500 feet has created preservation conditions that have prevented the rapid deterioration that would normally affect metal objects over such extended periods. The pressure at that depth is more than 500 times greater than at sea level, but rather than destroying the aircraft, it appears to have helped preserve it by creating an environment that inhibits the biological processes that would normally cause rapid decay. The aircraft's aluminum construction has withstood the deep water conditions remarkably well, and even smaller components remain clearly visible to the cameras. The discovery of this intact Wildcat provides an incredible view of American naval aviation technology from 1942. While we cannot definitively state the condition of the internal wing-mounted weaponry without detailed inspection, the overall preservation of the aircraft suggests that significant components of the original armament may still be present within the wing structures. The aircraft represents a direct connection to the young pilots who flew these planes in combat, and every component visible in the footage tells part of the story of American naval aviation during World War II. This remarkable preservation shows us exactly what these aircraft looked like when they were operational, providing historians and aviation enthusiasts with an unparalleled view of authentic World War II naval aviation equipment. The discovery represents far more than just a well-preserved artifact. It's a window into the technology and courage that characterized American naval aviation during one of the most critical periods in our nation's history. Click the video on screen to see what other weapons they found on sunken warships.